Hi, my name is Josh Goldman. I'm the writer and director of Beneath the Tree. Now, before I go any further, I want to say that I will be spoiling some key plot points in this behind-the-scenes look at the film. So if you haven't watched the short yet, click here and then come back. Don't worry, I'll wait. All good? Okay, let's talk behind the scenes. Beneath the Tree's genesis was a single shot that occurs toward the end of the film. It's the main reveal that Amy has actually been dead for a few years and that Tessa has been alone beneath the tree. Well before I even started writing the script, I had this image in my head of two people sitting and talking at the base of a tree, and that the camera would pass behind something. It later became another tree. And we'd see that there was actually only one person sitting underneath that tree, that the other person was never really there. And fun tidbit, despite that shot, which is the critical reveal in the story, it almost didn't make it into the final version of the film. In fact, it wasn't even in the first several rough cuts. Anyway, that's how a lot of my stories begin. A single thought or idea that I can clearly see visually. After I had this thought, I filed it away. And while talking to two of my actor friends, Anna and Jenny, the two stars of the film, they both expressed wanting to do some more film work. So I said I would write something for them to be in. I took that original idea I'd filed away and started writing what I thought might be a 3 to 4 minute film. 15 pages and several bouts of writer's block later, I had built a small world for the two characters in the movie, Tessa and Amy. Once the script had been tweaked and rewritten and tweaked and rewritten, and the cast and the crew were secured, we were nearly ready to film. But before I get to the actual production, don't worry, I'm almost there. I don't want to gloss over the pre-production part and make it seem like it was a walk in the park. It wasn't. Due to our low budget, I ended up wearing a lot of different hats on this project, in addition to being the writer and the director. I think it's sort of a rite of passage for low-budget indie filmmakers to wear a lot of hats when you're making a film. But what it meant was that not only was I involved in every decision that needed to be made for the film, but also that oftentimes I was the only one to even be around to make a decision. I location scouted, secured permits, arranged for film insurance, bought food for craft services, rented all the equipment, and more. It was hard, and it was a challenge, but it was also invaluable. This was a passion project, so I knew I needed to give it everything I had if I expected anyone else helping on the film to give anything they had. Okay, so with all that behind me, it was finally time to shoot. Since everyone acting in and working on the crew for the film was working full time, that meant we had to shoot on weekends only, and due to schedules and travel, we had exactly 1 weekend to film. 15 pages, 4 locations, 2 days, a handful of crew members, 2 actors. Let me stop here and tell you that this schedule was insanely ambitious and, well, actually just insane. We kicked things off pretty early that Saturday morning and started filming around 10 a.m. Feeling tired, but excited, and we're almost ready to go for our first shot.
It's gonna be great!
Yeah. So, let's go do it. Due to the schedule, we weren't able to film sequentially. That, in addition to filming in a relatively small 2-bedroom apartment, made things logistically challenging to pull off. But with a lot of trial and error and a lot of hard work from intelligent and talented people, we managed to film about 8 pages that first day and wrapped around 11:30 that night. On that first day, we probably had more than 25 setups across those 8 pages, which meant a lot of maneuvering and a lot of adjustment. One thing that really helped was some of the pre-production work that I had done with the director of photography, Zan Gillies. One of the really clever ideas he came up with was to assign camera movements to character moments. So for example, when Tessa's life is spiraling out of control, the camera would be on a shoulder rig, which would give it a really unsettled look. When her life was more put together and things were going well, as we see in some of the flashback scenes, we had the camera stabilized on a tripod or a dolly or a monopod. One of my favorite scenes in the whole film that we shot is the one where Tessa listens to a voicemail where Amy tells her that she's dying. Zan came up with this brilliant idea to film this in a single shot, moving from the stability of the camera on a monopod to lifting the camera during the shot onto his shoulder as she hears the bad news. It was a great idea, and Zan nailed the camera movement, all while pulling his own focus. That, coupled with nice choreography from our boom operator Andy, and a really tremendous performance from Anna, who played Tessa, led to a dynamite final shot that you see in the film. In one shot, we visually see Tessa go from stable to unstable.
message and I'll get back to you.
Amy, I'm so sorry.
After a long but ultimately successful day 1, we were ready to tackle the outdoor scenes on day 2, and thankfully, the rain that had been forecasted wrapped up Saturday night, and we were greeted with an unseasonably cool but pleasant June Sunday. We started the morning at the tree around 7 a.m., which was located at a large park in Arlington, Virginia. I had a permit to film in the park, but we were rolling the dice as to whether or not anyone else would be around, since we couldn't afford to shut down that area in the park. In my head, I pictured a somewhat secluded location for our characters to meet, and honestly, we lucked out. We filmed for about 5 hours at the park and had limited interruption from other people.
All right, and action.
I guess the only reason I came here today was because I found this.
Ah, yes. The book.
This note. It reminded me that we used to do this every year.
It was always something I looked forward to.
Even after you moved, you always came back to meet me.
I haven't missed a year yet. And I don't think I'll miss one anytime soon.
I still don't understand why you gave it to me.
Unfortunately, at this point, we had a problem. Everyone was tired. I mean, really tired. And well, just watch this, you'll understand. While Zan and I shot the 2 quick scenes of our main character driving, which coincidentally I completely reshot 2 months later in a different location and with a different camera, the rest of the team napped. And they napped hard, which thankfully gave them energy to film our last scenes of the day. We made our way to American University in Washington, D.C. around 4 in the afternoon that Sunday to film the last scene we needed to capture. And after getting set up, we had about an hour to film before we completely lost the light. The original scene in the script was meant to take place midday, but that went out the door when we only had the chance to film the scene at dusk. That's one of the biggest lessons I learned on the film. Not everything is going to go your way. You have to be flexible. We were tired, we were spent, but we adjusted and made it work. I was so happy to be finished with what I thought was the most challenging part of the film. But little did I know I had quite the experience in front of me. I spent the better part of the entire next year editing the film. And again, since it was a low-budget film, I wore many of the post-production hats myself, with the exception of 2 that I'll get to in a second. I went through ups and downs with how I felt about the film. At times, I thought it was great. And at times, I thought it was awful. But more than 10 different cuts, 9 months, and a whole lot of outside feedback later, I finally had a picture-locked film. And I was pretty happy with it. Which brings me to the final 2 pieces that needed to be completed. First was the color grading. We shot the film in RAW, which, if you don't know, is a format that records the image in a really flat color profile. Essentially, not a lot of detail in the image. That allows you to really finesse the picture after the fact to get a look that really works thematically with each scene. But this is definitely not something I had any experience doing. So I found an excellent colorist named Taylor Jones, who is based in Kansas City, and he made the magic happen. In this first before image, you can see Tessa standing in the bathroom contemplating taking painkillers at the beginning of the film. The way it was shot, and the way it was lit by Zan on set, was meant to show her isolation down this long hallway. But as you can see in the after shot, Taylor took what we created on set and gave it an even deeper feeling. He enriched the shot and others in Tessa's most depressing moments with a blue hue that stood in stark contrast to some of the warm, golden colors we'd see later in Tessa's happier times. In the second before image, you can see that this wide shot of Tessa walking to meet Amy at the tree looks really dull and flat. But after Taylor finishes work, we are left with a rich and colorful world. Film is a visual medium after all, so the work Taylor did was invaluable in telling the story to its fullest extent. The second piece that needed to be completed was music composition, and I really lucked out on this one. After the film's original composer had to leave the project due to scheduling issues, I put out a call for a composer, any composer really, to come on board and score the film. The only catch? The work needed to be completed in about 3 weeks from start to finish to meet some key festival deadlines. I got messages from a bunch of aspiring composers around the country, but none really seemed to fit, until I heard from Scott Stevens. Scott was based in Washington State, and after talking with him on the phone, I was confident he was the man for the job. He worked quickly and composed a beautiful and moving tapestry of music for the film, 4 original compositions in all that completely fit my vision. I couldn't be happier with our collaboration, and I'm lucky to have found someone so talented.
Well, I like the cover. Pretty.
It reminded me of your stuff.
Plus, once you read this one, you can read the other two.
There are 2 more.
Fine. If you won't read the book, at least read what I wrote.
Well, I like the cover. Pretty.
It reminded me of your stuff. Plus, once you read this one, you can read the other two.
There are 2 more.
Fine. If you won't read the book, at least read what I wrote.
Now that the last pieces were in place, I had a final locked film at the end of April 2016. And I was happy with what I created. So I started submitting to film festivals and began hoping the movie would make its premiere in the next few months. But I waited, and waited, and waited, and finally I started to hear back. Rejected, not accepted, no thank you. After a year of submitting to festivals around the United States, I heard back from the last one. No. 15 rejections in all. At first, I was disheartened, but still determined. And then, as the rejections began to number in the double digits, I was really bummed. Like, really bummed. I started to think that what I'd made might actually be terrible. But after some time, and as you've heard, time heals all wounds, I started to think, maybe it's not terrible at all. Maybe it just wasn't the right cup of tea for some of the festival programmers. Maybe it was too long to fit nicely into a short film slot. Maybe someone was turned off by the strong language. Maybe it was something entirely out of my control. Here's what I do know. I learned a lot making this film. I learned lessons I never would have learned if this project didn't go from an idea in my head to a finished 18-minute film. I grew as a filmmaker, as a leader, as a person, and I'm proud of what I put together. Nothing in filmmaking is easy, but it can be rewarding, and it can be fun, and I can't wait to make the next film. And maybe, if I'm lucky, I'll learn as much as I did on this one.